Welcome. Today, we're diving into some ancient stories that have a surprising amount to say about our lives right now. We're not just going to look at what they meant back then, but what they mean for us today.
So let's kick things off with a big question. How can a story that's 2,000 years old actually change your life in the 21st century? It sounds like a stretch, but let's see.
We're going to explore 6 of Jesus's parables. Now, these aren't just cute little fables with a simple moral at the end. They're more like thought experiments designed to get you thinking about what he called the kingdom of God, which is really just a radical new way of seeing and living in the world. All right, our first big idea is all about growth. It's this concept that massive, world-changing results can spring from the tiniest, most insignificant-looking beginnings. So, imagine this. A woman sees people are going hungry in her town. She doesn't have a big budget or a fancy organization. All she does is make a single social media post, asking if anyone wants to help share a meal. At first, maybe just a couple of friends show up, but they keep at it. And that one tiny post, it snowballs into a whole movement that ends up feeding hundreds, building a real community from almost nothing. That little story is a perfect modern-day echo of the parable of the mustard seed. Jesus pointed to this tiny, tiny seed to make a huge point. The kingdom of God starts almost invisibly, but it grows into something so big it can actually provide shelter and life for others. Or think about it like this. You've got a baker with a huge bowl of flour. All they do is mix in a tiny little bit of yeast. You can't even see it. The dough just kind of sits there. But underneath the surface, quietly and invisibly, that yeast is transforming everything from the inside out. And that's the parable of the yeast. See, it's not about some big external force. It's about a quiet, internal influence that spreads and completely changes the whole thing. It's a transformation that happens in the dark, but you absolutely cannot deny its effects. Now, this idea points to a powerful theological concept called sanctifying grace. It's this belief that real, deep change in a person usually isn't some big, dramatic overnight event. Instead, it's a slow, gradual, internal process. It's a quiet reshaping of who we are from the inside out. It suggests that growth is less about huge gestures and more about that consistent, unseen progress. So, from small, quiet growth, we move to our next big principle. The idea of discovering something so valuable, so priceless, that it instantly reorders every single one of your priorities. Jesus tells these 2 brilliant little stories that tackle this from completely different angles. In one, you've got a guy who literally stumbles upon a hidden treasure by complete accident while he's just doing his job. And in the other, you have this expert merchant who has spent his entire life, his whole career, searching for the one perfect pearl. And one day, he finds it. But what's so fascinating is that it doesn't matter if they found it by accident or after a lifetime of searching. The response is exactly the same. They discover it, they immediately realize its incredible worth, and then they sell everything they have to get it. And here's the most important part. They do it with joy. This isn't a story about grim sacrifice or loss. Not at all. It's a story about a joyful exchange. The focus is never on what they gave up. It's all about the overwhelming joy of gaining something they knew deep in their bones was of ultimate, incomparable worth. Okay, so what happens when these incredible ideas of hidden growth and ultimate value collide with the messy, complicated reality of the world we actually live in? Well, that brings us to our final principle, a realistic look at how truth is actually received. Think about somebody sharing a really powerful, hopeful message online. We see this every day, right? Some people will just scroll right past, totally indifferent. Others might hit like, but then they forget about it the second things get hard. A whole lot of people are just too distracted by everything else for the message to sink in. But for a few, that message takes root, and it genuinely changes their lives. This scenario is a direct reflection of the parable of the sower. The story basically says there are 4 different conditions of the human heart when it comes to receiving a message of truth. It can be hard and closed off, shallow, totally distracted, or receptive. So the parable isn't just describing 4 types of people. It's really an invitation. The whole point is to cultivate a heart that's like that good soil, a heart that can actually hear something meaningful, hold on to it, and through perseverance, let it grow into something good in the world. And this connects to this other really interesting idea called prevenient grace. It's the belief that maybe we can't make our own heart's good soil all by ourselves. This perspective suggests that something is already at work in us, preparing us to be open to truth before we even hear it, which kind of implies that being receptive isn't just about us trying harder, but maybe it's a gift.
But let's be honest, reality is even more complicated than that, isn't it? Good and evil, truth and lies, they often grow right next to each other, sometimes looking so similar it's hard to tell them apart. And that brings us to our last parable. It's about a community garden where an enemy secretly sows weeds among all the good plants.
Now, when the workers see the weeds, they immediately want to go in and start ripping them all out. But the wise farmer tells them no. Why? Because in trying to uproot all the bad stuff, they would inevitably damage the good stuff too. His advice is patience. He says, let both grow together until the harvest and leave the final judgment for the right time. The symbolism here is pretty powerful. The world is the field, and good and evil are coexisting in it. The big takeaway is that our job isn't to be the judge and jury trying to rip out everything we think is wrong. Our job is to grow faithfully and to trust that the final, perfect separation will happen when it's supposed to, at the harvest. So let's just pull this all together. These ancient stories paint this really rich, complex picture of the kingdom of God. First, it's something that starts incredibly small and often grows in unseen ways. Second, it's something of such ultimate value that it's worth a joyful exchange of everything else you have. And third, it's a reality that exists right here in our messy, complicated world, and it requires a ton of patience and faith. And all of this leaves us with one final, very personal question. These parables describe a hidden treasure, a perfect pearl that is worth everything. So they kind of turn the question back on us and ask, what in your life is of such ultimate value that you would joyfully exchange everything else for it? What is your treasure?